Before we begin, also wanted to make a special note of the Atlanta Forum Network is recording all of our lectures. They're recording this one today, and if you know anyone that misses this lecture, encourage them to go to their website and they could watch it there, as well as past lectures that we've had here at Culture Club. Also on a sort of a, not personal note, but most of you know Rachel Evans over here working with us. I told her to come up. I didn't tell her what it's about. But if you don't know, Rachel is currently Miss Atlanta. Rachel, come here. Come here. Miss Evans is Miss Atlanta, so we're very proud to have her here. But she is leaving next week to go for Miss Georgia. So just keep her in your thoughts and prayers that she does well, okay? You want to say a word? You want to say it? Okay. Okay, so let's get this going. So again, we're very excited to have Mary Pat here from the Atlanta Botanical Garden, and I'm going to pass the mic over to our illustrious Spalding Nix, who will say a few words. Thank you.
Just very quickly, I'd like to thank George and Rachel and the Englishman for putting on such a great show tonight. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much. Round of applause. And I think we should probably go ahead and get started. Just wanted to briefly introduce Mary Pat. Mary Pat Matheson has been with the Botanical Garden since 2002, so in her 7th year. And to think how much the Botanical Gardens has changed over the last 7 years, Mary Pat is the reason why. So we're really, really lucky to have her here tonight. And she's going to be discussing with us the incredible Henry Moore exhibition. So without further ado, Mary Pat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to find my giz, as we call it at home, the remote control. Do we all have a name for that at home? Thank you. Is it possible to lower the lights? It's great to be with you, and I want to just recognize you for caring about culture and art, because it's near and dear to my heart, and a botanical garden is all a part of that. And Sean, hey babe, how are you? Well, I know someone. It's good to... Yes, last time we were together, we were kind of in britches. Anyway, it's great to see you all here and interested in the Henry Moore exhibit and what we're doing at the garden. As you know, we've done a lot of kind of edgy, crazy things in the last 7 years, from the Chihuly exhibit, which was phenomenal, great success, almost a $60 million impact economically to the city of Atlanta. So it's not just about great art, it's also about bringing people to our community. But the one that I thought was a little risque and a little edgy that we really wanted to do to push the envelope was the Nikki de St. Paul exhibit that we did in 2006. Was that great? Yeah. You know, and a couple of men would call us and say, what is it with the fat women? And, you know, art is in the eye of the beholder. But I love that exhibit because you learned a lot about what Nikki de St. Paul was saying about art through her artwork, from how women are to be celebrated, you know, in their multiple roles, and a lot of things to say about racism. That's why all the images of women were green and yellow and black and blue, because it didn't matter what color you are. So here we are, flash forward to a new year, and really in terms of the work that we've done for art in Atlanta and connecting that to the Botanical Garden, the Henry Moore exhibit is the pinnacle. So I always want to say that because I don't want you to think we're going to top this, because I don't think we can. We'll bring new art and other things in the future, but Henry Moore is so prestigious. But before I get to Henry Moore and his work, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing at the garden. Have any of you been there since we opened early May? Oh, great, good. I hope you enjoyed the new entrance to the garden. We've really turned the entrance to the garden to Piedmont Park, and in fact, the old entrance is now under construction as we build a cascade waterfall garden on that road that went under the Children's Garden Bridge, and an edible garden which will be in the old parking lot. We're going from asphalt to asparagus. I think that's a really good trade-off. And we worry about where our food comes from and healthy eating and wellness, and that's all about that. And in the middle of the edible garden is an outdoor kitchen. So we're going to be doing food and wine pairings and the Great Chef series. We've already got Linton over at Restaurant Eugene who's promised to come over and cook for us. So it's going to be a great new addition. So we've gone from being what we call Atlanta's living room, the garden, especially on Thursday nights when we have cocktails in the garden, to next year also Atlanta's kitchen. So I'm going to look forward to seeing you all there. But let me tell you about where we are here in 2009. This is the new entrance to the garden, and we face Piedmont Park. We did open that parking facility that was in the news more than it needed to be. Thank you. I want you to come see it and look over and see that you cannot see it. And it was always a way to solve a problem, which is we can't have visitors in this city. Now, in New York, you could, but not in this city without having a way to park cars. But we thought if you're going to park cars, let's do it in a really good, environmentally sustainable way. Put them in a hillside. So we almost have 800 parking spaces in a 1-acre green parking facility. And Grant Park, which I think in the future will change, has 13 acres for 1,000 cars. 13 acres of black asphalt parking lot. So that's why we continue to tell people it really is green. And this is looking towards the city. We have planters on it and 24-foot magnolias. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But you can have a place to park your car, whether you come to the garden or to Piedmont Park, because we're sharing the parking with our neighbor Piedmont Park. And it is about green space expansion because their parking lot in the heart of Piedmont Park is coming out. And that will be a new park space. Someday they'll put a carousel there. And ours, I've already told you, will be an edible garden. And it's access for everyone and safety as well. So that is the top level of parking deck, one of the best views in the city. This is the new entrance to the Visitor Center. And the Visitor Center, everything we've done is about green architecture and green design. So we expect that this will be certified in that LEED system, which is the green architecture designation, at gold, which is second from the top. And it has many features that are very green, including 3 green roofs, which a lot of reasons why you want to do that, to save energy, to create new habitat, to slow down water in terms of erosion. But it's also because it's just beautiful. Why do you want a big, a roof to look at when you can see a garden? But you can see here one of Henry Moore's pieces. Is that, oh good, laser light. This is large knife edge. And this piece is one that he did for IMPay for the East Wing of the National Art Gallery in Washington, D.C. Have you seen that building? Many of you, I'm sure. It comes to this incredible edge, the side of the building, like a knife. It's so sharp. It triangulates. And so the front piece of this, the other side of this, is the same way. But he, Henry Moore really was on the cutting edge of public art and really connected a lot to some of the best architects in the world, including, and most importantly, IMPay. And he has 2 pieces that we have in our exhibit related to that. But this is the new entrance to the garden. And again, being a very green building and a welcoming center for us, we wanted to, of course, because we do art a lot in the garden, bring art back into this facility. And you can see the Chihuly chandelier. When we did the Chihuly exhibit, we bought 2 pieces. And this is the Nepenthes chandelier, which was designed around our tropical pitcher plant collection, which is a carnivorous plant. And just a side story, Dale Chihuly he'll tell you, he does not create glass to look like nature. Oh, I would still say somebody inoculated him as a young man with nature because it looks a lot, but it's not an exact replica. But we wanted to inspire him everything he made for our exhibit was made for our exhibit, but they were all pieces that he used in other chandeliers. We wanted to really inspire him to do something he'd never done before. So we sent him 3 boxes of our pitcher plants, and these are beautiful plants with pitchers on them that are really vases that hold not just water but alkaloids from the plant that when insects crawl in, they digest. That's where they get their nutrients. So we sent him these beautiful plants, and they had them all over the studio, and he created this piece because of those plants. It really did inspire him. And we decided to move it from the conservatory and into the new visitor center so every visitor could see it, and it is just stunning. It's really beautiful. And then note these great doors. These are 19 feet tall, and they pivot open. And it's one way to just go, wow, this is a great building, and I've never seen anything like it in Atlanta, which is what we wanted to show. But the other is that, going back to that green architecture, if we don't have to air condition the building in the summertime because it's a breezeway, well, look at all the energy we save, and same in the winter. So when the doors are open like that, it automatically, with a sensor, shuts off the air conditioning and or the heat in the wintertime. So we don't climatize the building. It's a beautiful way to enter the garden, and you have to come see it because it's really fantastic. So on to Henry Moore. He is one of the finest, if not the finest, contemporary sculptor of the last century. He died in 1986, and he was really extraordinary in that he, like the Impressionists, I guess, really pushed the envelope of art, and what he did is push it with regard to size and working in public spaces. So the exhibit is called Moore in America, and people ask us, how in the world did we get the largest Henry Moore exhibit that's ever been in the United States to come to Atlanta? And we do sort of have a low self-esteem in Atlanta, don't you think? We're working on that. We don't need to have a low self-esteem. It's a great city. I've been here 7 years and seen it change so rapidly. But we had, after Chihuly, I was already thinking, you know, Henry Moore I've known since I was a kid. I just have always loved his work. Waiting for the moment, and after his death, there were a lot of legal issues about his estate and his work, so it took a while before they could really travel major exhibitions again, and we heard that this was going to Kew Gardens. So first time they'd ever done it in a botanical garden in 2007, and immediately said, we have to call the Henry Moore Foundation because people are going to line up to get his work. And so we called them, and it turned out that the New York Botanical Garden in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, which is a fabulous garden, much older than ours, just really wonderful, had already called them. So they said, they said, let's work together. And so we came up with the idea of Moore in America. We worked together to raise some money. Got really scary last year when the economy went upside down, but we did okay. And Moore in America was born. And so it went from New York to here. And it is the largest, as I said, exhibit that's ever been in the United States. And I was with a colleague the other day who just came back from France, and he read an article in France because they were kind of cranky that it left England to go to America. They were not happy. And I always like it when I can outdo the English or the French. So this is Henry, and you know the thing that a lot of people don't know about Henry, you know, people, and I want to remind you that I am a botanical garden director, not an art director. So I don't know everything about the man, but I've come to understand and already knew from his forms how organic they are. But when I went over to Perry Greene to his studio and met the people and looked through his studios, which are intact, originally intact, I understood that he was truly inspired by nature, that the works didn't just come from nowhere. They came from sort of his love of nature and some other things that I'll talk about. But he loves landscapes, he loves texture, he loved form, and he spent a lot of time walking the pastures. His studio, which I'll get to, is in Perry Greene, which is an hour and a half north of London. And it's up in the sheep country, and he would walk through the sheep country. When we were there, he has this piece sitting at the top of a hill. It's massive bronze. They probably never want to move it again. And little tiny sheep grazing under it. So wonderful. When we did our grand opening, we had to meet the sheep. So we had the sheep in the garden for 3 days because we wanted our visitors to know that the sheep were part of his world. He collected sheep bones. And I had this great story because I lived in the West where I hike a lot and collect elk bones and antlers, and they weather and they're so beautiful. And I was telling that story, and one of the people who worked for him said, but Mary Pat, with a British accent, people used to give him their lamb chops. And he liked those bones too. So it wasn't just all weathered sheep bones, but he did have a love of the sheep because they were part of his world. You know, this is a little bit about who he was as a man. He went through 2 wars, and certainly World War II really affected him and his ability to do sculpture for a long time. He studied at the Royal College of Art, worked with native British materials from carving, and he did carve originally and later moved into bronze. And he was influenced by many sculptors in the early 1920s. This is his wife, Irina, and Henry on the right, and I'll tell you a little bit more about their daughter in a minute. But he was cutting the edge. He was really on the edge of art and the work that he was doing, and he was just beginning to think about mother and child. And if you see his reclining figures, you know that that is a recurring theme. He has many reclining figures, often with the child, but most of those came about after his daughter was born. He had 1 daughter. But again, you can see down here in the bullet point, stones, twigs, bones, shells become a point of departure in his creative process. His studio is loaded with stuff like that, bones, shells, pebbles, and African artifacts, because he was very interested in Africa as well. But you can see how his work is beginning to evolve. And in the 40s and 50s, the war came on. It became very difficult. This doesn't say that, but he had lost 2 homes in London to the bombing. And Perry Greene became his place of refuge and where he could do work. And he could not do sculpture then because there was no way you could get materials to do bronze, but he did a lot of his drawings. And he did some tapestries. And I didn't realize he did tapestries. He has these phenomenal tapestries hanging at Perry Greene. And if you ever go, you can visit, if you make arrangements to visit, in a space, a building that almost looks like a cathedral to art. It's so beautiful in wood and beautiful tall ceilings, and his tapestries hang in there, and he created lots of fabrics out of them. So he was someone who dabbled a lot. He obviously found his calling financially once he started doing the really large sculpture. So this is Perry Greene, and as I said, you get on a train, you go about an hour and a half north of London, and it's in the country, and there are little pubs and places to eat, but it's very quiet and very beautiful. He and his wife love cactus, and I think that has to also be connected to his love of Africa. Now, cactus are plants from North America, but they're plants in the Euphorbia family from Africa that look very similar. But he loved succulent plants, and they had this greenhouse. They've left the home intact. Now, I can only just tell you the story that they told me. When he was looking at his legacy as to what he would do with his art, he has 850 pieces of his art that are now in the foundation. He started talking to the Tate, and they were very interested in building a gallery to Henry Moore at the Tate Museum in London. And he would have left his legacy to the Tate Museum. But what happened is a lot of sculptors were very upset by that, even people who studied under him, because they were worried that the Tate would then be so concentrated on Henry Moore that they would do less contemporary new sculpture, and it would hurt the field in general. So that idea kind of unraveled, and he created his own foundation, and the foundation also supports artists in London. So in a way, something that was very painful to him and very negative may have turned into a positive, because the art and the legacy is secure. Perry Greene is there for people to visit, and he is also, through his financial legacy, leaving grants and giving grants to new artists. So creating that, he's still mentoring people today. These are some of his tapestries here and his drawings. And we have worked with Fay Gold's gallery. We have works on paper, and it's only here for another week or so. So if you want to see his drawings that relate to the work that are in the garden, you need to come soon because they're headed back to London. He won many awards, and I would rather talk more about his gallery, his studio, because I think it's so fascinating. You can see some of the bones and some of his maquettes that he's working on. It is exactly like this today. They've left his sketches, the bones. They even have, and I don't have the picture here, but I took it when I was there, his transistor radio. Now, my husband's an artist, and he always has some radio program on while he's working. They need that background noise, I think. But so did Henry Moore with his transistor radio. It's insight into the man, and I think that's great with art. Art comes alive so much more when you understand what was behind it and the person who was doing it. Again, he then moved away from his carvings, and at some point in the 60s through the 80s really discovered the monumental nature of his work and his ability to work with architects and cities and do things in public spaces. So public art is relatively new in some respects, and he's certainly been a leader and huge influencer on that. Anyone been to Toronto, and the AGO gallery there has a phenomenal collection of his work, as does Kansas City. You've been. It's just phenomenal. It's great. And in Atlanta we have one, and it's at Coca-Cola's headquarters. So you can't see it unless you have a reason to be there. And it's unfortunate. I wish we had a piece here that would be available for people to see. So I have some slides of the Gardens exhibition and some that are also from New York and Kew. And one of the things that's unique about our exhibition is that, as I said, they've done his work so often in public spaces and often in urban settings with big buildings behind it. And then with Kew in New York, very pastoral landscapes, like you would see up in northern England, where you had, big expanses of green and the trees above. We're not like that. We're a very tight, horticulturally intense urban garden. So when they came here, I was a little worried that they would say, well, we don't have a 200-acre vista. But they didn't. They said, this is phenomenal because every corner that you turn, you will see a piece of art. And we were excited because we said we could really take his art and connect it to the plants, which are what we're about. So this is the first time his work has ever been in a garden, in the garden, not just on the lawn. And so this is one of his pieces that is we have two that are fiberglass. This one is in fiberglass because it's so massive. It's just huge. It's a reclining figure, very contemporary, very abstract. And the original is in Singapore at an IMP building. And the reason this is in fiberglass is you could not transport it. It's just too massive. But it looks wonderful in fiberglass. And at night when it's lit up, it just has this really ghost ambiance to it. It's really wonderful. But you can see the gardens we have around. We're going to pop it a little with these reds and then with the purple cannas. And you can't see it. There's an arm here for this piece leaning out, and there's a big banana tree that by the end of summer will be up here. So the exhibit will change. It changes with the light. The patinas change with the light, but it will change with the plants around it. And I love that about having art in a garden. We're not static. We don't have walls, and we change every day, every morning, every hour, and every year. Now, mother and child was a big part of his world, and the influence came after his daughter was born. And incidentally, his daughter remarried after she got divorced and remarried, and her stepdaughter lives in Atlanta. And when we were installing the exhibit, there were these two young women, and they came over and introduced themselves, and it was his stepdaughter and his granddaughter who was visiting from England. So isn't that funny? You just never know what's in your own backyard, do you? But he had a couple of obsessions, as he would say, and one was mother and child and the reclining figure. He studied it in so many ways. And I don't know why he did it, but you'll notice that his faces are anonymous. There's no detail in his faces. This is what we can do with Henry Moore. I call this the altar to Moore, because this is in our orchid center. And we love our orchids. We have the largest orchid center in the United States. We have almost 2,000 species of orchids that occur in the wild that are disappearing, unfortunately. So it's really a repository for safeguarding those plants. But what you can do with great design and beautiful plants and incredible sculpture, you can't do that in a museum. So I just think that's phenomenal. And again, this is mother and child. And we have one piece that's a male, the Goslar Warrior. He didn't do many men. And this is obviously the mother and the child. But when you come see it, note this. That's a hand on her shoulder. And that's the only thing of the man in her life. I don't know what that means, if he was leaving her or watching over her, or you can interpret it as you wish. But people will see that and never see that. And that's one of our problems. We don't see. Now, artists see and scientists see because they have a different way of looking at the world. But make sure you see that, because when you see it, it'll give you goosebumps. It's really amazing to me once I noticed that, and we talked about it a little bit more. Another reclining figure. He likes to put them on different surfaces. And this one is a little bit like, what do you think? She's very cocky. She's very sure of herself. And she sits in our parterre garden right now. This was in New York. But he liked to study the different reposes. And the works on paper are all sketches, mostly sketches of his reclining figures. So you can see the different iterations as he moved through them and decided to create sculptures out of them. Again, what we can do in a garden, another one of his reclining figures, and with a lot of reds and pinks and whites around it. It's just beautiful. And again, this is a very dark Bettina. You'll see some turquoise Bettinas that we have that we set off with white flowers underneath them. The Bettina is really amazing. You first look at the sculpture and then the details, but the more you see it, the more you understand that the Bettina is so much about how the piece feels to you and looks to you and what he was trying to do with his art. This is a very abstract reclining figure. Now, this is not how we've displayed it. This is at New York again. Very pastoral, very green. It was a beautiful exhibition, but very different from what you'll see here. This is Goslar Warrior. I didn't get a picture of it at the garden, so you'll have to come see it. But the one male figure that he did, and it sits in the water feature, one of our still pools in front of the conservatory. And it's just beautiful. It's just looks, I think the exhibit in Atlanta looks like it was meant to be in this garden. It just looks like it was of the garden. So the other thing he did is he liked to work with multiple pieces. And this piece of work has 3 large pieces. It's right when you come into our woodland. It's very abstract, but children see a face in it. If you can see the face here, children see the bunny in it. And adults look at it forever and never would see a bunny. But, we see through different lenses. Once you see it, you can see it. And when you come now, you'll have to look at it. Yeah. See, this is so great. I always see this. People come to the garden and I'll talk about it. What do you see? Now, I had one man who saw a mermaid. I don't know where that came from. I think his fantasy, I guess. But children see the bunny. And again, here's a very bronze, a very golden patina to this piece, but it's in the shadows in our garden, so it doesn't glow quite as much as this. It takes on a richer tone. This is it from a different perspective. So very angular, like legs, but here would be the bunny if you looked at it from this side. That's just the fun animated side of things. We're always looking for animals. That's why botanical gardens don't do as well as zoos. We're always looking for animals. What's that about? But it's really a wonderful piece. You'll come into the new garden. So you come into the new visitor center and you enter the garden now through our woodland. So I call it the Cathedral of Trees. It's just this beautiful setting of these massive trees. And Atlanta really is a city of trees. It's a phenomenal city that way. But we don't have many left that are still connected, many woodlands left. So it's a beautiful way to enter the garden. And this piece sits in the Cathedral of Trees, surrounded now with our blue hydrangeas, which all just came into bloom. So if you're not drooling yet and ready to come, I don't know what else I can do. This is a piece that sits in front of our fountain that, again, you're starting to see some of the patina. This one is one of the Turquoise Bettinas. Again, he's still playing with multiple forms and abstraction of the reclining figure. In some cases, it's hard to understand the reclining figure. This is one of those to me. Here we go. Here again, now we're at Atlanta. So you can see the difference. I wanted to show you Kew and New York and the green pastoral versus this intense horticultural. So it's just floating in a cloud of white euphorbias, and this is very turquoise. It's really wonderful. And I just want to climb into here and read a book, It's a little too small for me, but why did he do this, this circular thing in the middle of this piece? It's wonderful. And a little bit about how we got the exhibit. So it left England in late 2007 to go to New York, or early 2008 actually. And it was shipped on 2 ships because, God forbid, something happened to a ship, you wouldn't want to lose 20 pieces of Henry Moore. So you think about these things. And installed in New York. And then to bring it down here, it took 8 semi-trucks. And most of the work is crated up. But 2 pieces were too large to crate, and this was one of them. So they came on the back of a flatbed truck. So wouldn't you like to be driving down, 95 and go, I'm following Henry Moore, and I'm going wherever he's going. If you would recognize it. I had some people call, and they did recognize it, but most are, we're in the clouds when we drive. So, but I pulled in after a lunch engagement, and this piece was on the truck just in the driveway, and goosebumps everywhere. It was just so amazing to see Henry Moore pull in a truck. Yeah.
Are all those pieces connected, or would you maybe by mistake put it in a different way than it was supposed to be?
Great question. The question, I'm asked to repeat the question, are all the pieces connected? In some cases they are, but remember I mentioned he liked to do multiple pieces. This is a piece that comes in 2 different pieces, this section and this section. And we could not put it together right. And we couldn't have put Chickahooly together right. That was even worse because there were 100 pieces per piece. But the people from Henry Moore came and spent 3 weeks with us. And we had a great time with them. And I should tell you, we introduced them to Atlanta's food. And if you know British food, you know that they're going to want to come back here again. Shrimp and grits, we did it all. My favorite was we took them to Rathbun's Steakhouse. And, they don't get good meat in England, not like we do. And these guys ordered a steak as big as, woo! They ate every bite. It was a lot of fun. They loved it. We fed them and took good care of them. But they When we lay out an exhibition, we know our garden, we know the flow, we know our spaces, we know what works, and we also know how you can get cranes in. And they know Henry Moore and how to put it together and how they would want it to be seen by the public. So it's a great collaboration. So we laid it out together. And this piece was craned in from the other side. We had 4 cranes. This is really neat. This is locking Pebbles. That's not what it's called, but that was what inspired him. Have you ever just been out hiking or walking and looked at a creek and found 2 rocks that are just stuck together? He got obsessed by that. He wanted to understand how 2 pebbles could get interlocked. And this is his way of doing interlocking pebbles. So you can see how they're locked in together. It was one piece. And it just looks wonderful with a conservatory. It's just a great backdrop for this very architectural, very massive piece. Again, a very dark bronze. And the interactive nature of the exhibit, no, you can't climb on it like Nikki DeSaint Paul's work. We allowed people to climb on them. But you can put your head in there. So it's a great photo op. You look great with your red hair. Just pop it in there. But we see a lot of visitors taking their picture. You're going to come and do that. You have to do that. It'll be perfect because you can stand on the pedestal. We just can't have people sit on them and have, keychains or anything that would scratch the patina. That's the patina that's the greatest risk. But, here is a man who would just, find 2 pebbles and say, I need to make a piece of art about that. Isn't that wonderful? This is a piece you can go inside of. And if you remember the Nikki show, it's right where the skull was. Was that crazy? You could go in the skull. Did everybody go? And it's completely mirrored. And you sit in there and you look at yourself, in 1,000 ways, because it's like a funny house. And this is on the same spot. But you can go into the piece and look almost like the Zen view. Look at this window to the world that you can look through. So the art changes in a garden in a really amazing way. You can see it, almost all of this you can see 360 degrees, but a few of them you can see through them. And so now you're inside the art. And then the art creates nature as art. So I just love the interactive part of this. And speaking of interactive, the other thing, we want people to understand the garden and the art, and everybody's about interactivity today. You can't be static in this world. So on the 3rd Saturday of every month, we're doing the big draw. And people are coming and doing chalk drawing in the garden on our sidewalks, and we have some artists helping them to do that. We're encouraging plein air painters to come. Anybody who brings a sketchbook on Saturday gets $2 off admission. We want you to come and be inspired by more. And we have people sitting in the garden painting and drawing, little children. When we did the grand opening, we had organic Play-Doh. It was homemade, healthy Play-Doh, and everybody was making Play-Doh sculptures at Henry Moore. So come find your inner artist this Saturday. It's going to be the big draw, and the 3rd Saturday of every month. Now, this piece is amazing. Have you seen it? It's so amazing. This is our most controversial place for a piece of art for our horticulture staff, but most fantastic place because of the city view. And I'll tell you why. Controversial because it sits in our native bog. These are pitcher plants and native orchids from Georgia and North Carolina. Very precious, very rare, really important to our conservation work. Imagine plopping a big piece of art and a foundation and a crane all around that. It's very sensitive. My staff just has heart failure. We try to send them away when we do it. But it's so spectacular, and it draws your eye to the bog as well as the art. But let me tell you about this piece of art. Any idea what that is? Who knows that? Oh, it says it. You cheat. That was not rocket science. That's great. Well, more, as I've said, I should read what I bring, right? Moore was really infatuated with African artifacts and African art. And interestingly enough, when I was there, I asked how often he went to Africa. He never went. But he collected pottery and tapestries and, carvings and all sorts of things that are in his home. And because his friends knew he collected bones, whether they ate them or they found them, one of his good friends was the head of the Zoological Society in Great Britain. And he presented Henry Moore with the skull of an African elephant. And it still sits in his studio in Perry Greene. It sits in a corner just like that. It's about as big as that corner. And it's just phenomenal. It's just that weathered, beautiful bone, and you can sort of see that it might have been an elephant, but it doesn't quite look like it because it has no no trunk. But this is his elephant skull. And as a part of it, he was also playing with the tension between these 2 points. You can just feel him striving to touch, but they're not going to touch. It's really a wonderful piece. It's intense. And it sits in this beautiful bog, and then the city is behind it. And at night, it's just wonderful because the city is lit up behind it. But this is one of my favorite pieces in the exhibit. And the other piece I showed you where the 2 people were in between it, that's one of his pieces that was inspired by the hills of England, where you see a hillside. They have many pastures, so the hillsides have no trees on them. So the hill goes up and curves like that and meets another hill, and you see a gap between it. That's sky, blue sky. So he played with curves and blue sky between, and you can see that in some of these pieces. This is just an example of the kind of big cranes we brought in. We brought in a crane to crane a crane, and we had multiple cranes, and it's a very challenging installation for us. The Henry Moore friends of ours have told us it was the most difficult installation they've ever done because it's such a small, tight urban garden. And by the way, our visitors are watching everything. We don't get to close the gallery and say, come back in 4 weeks. They get to watch it all. So you have people, and you have to manage that. But it makes it pretty exciting because it makes art come alive to the visitors and understand that it doesn't just present itself magically. That's that knife edge that was in front of our visitor center. This is, again, I believe this is in New York. Look at how the light changed the patina from the photograph I showed you early on. Another woman, seated figure. I love this. So these are his totems. And if you remember, I can't help but compare. Nikki de St. Paul had those wonderful totems with the snakes that wrapped around and the abalone. It was great. These totems I've seen twice, in New York and in London. And I was okay, but I wasn't like, wow, until we put them in the cactus garden. And there's something about the texture and the color, and of course the yuccas in bloom, and the verticality of these plants around them. They feel like they're home. And I hope you'll agree when you see them. They really look fabulous. This is on the side of our desert house by our conservatory. And again, you see this is kind of a blue-green patina, not as much as the turquoise, but a lot of deep green in it. And some of the colors are repeated, as well as some of the lavenders in the plants around it, around these 3 pieces. They're really wonderful. The day we installed this exhibit, I started mourning its loss. It's hard to do great art and have it leave. And this piece is in our conservatory. When you come, you'll have to look hard to find it. But it sits in the tropical rotunda, and it looks like bone. And this was obviously he was interested in bone and the nature of how bone would weather and age, but it's fiberglass, the only other fiberglass piece. So that's Moore in America. He was known to say, besides this, that he would far rather have his work out in nature than in any museum or any place with walls. So we feel like we're paying a great tribute to Henry Moore with this exhibit. And you have to help me pay tribute by coming to see it and telling everyone, because it will be gone. And, I can't tell you how many people say to me, darn, I wish I'd come to see Chihuly. You won't see it again in your lifetime anywhere. This exhibit will go back to London, and it will be, part of it will go back to his foundation in Perry Greene. Some of it will go to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, where they leave some of his work on display. But it won't be again, at least in our lifetime, I don't think. So enjoy it while it's here. It's great to see it in Atlanta. It's nice to see you all. And I think I love that. It's huggable. It's so huggable. Anyway, I think I can take questions. I didn't at all talk much about the garden, and it is really a phenomenal garden. I love this garden. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Biggest orchid center in the United States, a real commitment to plant conservation, and if you don't know about it, we do frogs, amphibian conservation, because frogs, particularly in Latin America, are disappearing catastrophically because of a fungus that's just wiping them out. Not in decades like we normally see with endangered species, but in months. And so we're breeding those animals and working in country to get them back out into the wild and hope someday that will improve. But I'll have to come back when you want to know more about nature and talk about the garden, because it's a great garden in your own backyard. So with that, I think I'll take questions. Yes?
I sure appreciated your positive spirit. That sounded great. It goes a long way.
Thank you.
Including all the totems, how many separate pieces are there?
Great question. The question is, how many separate pieces are there in the Henry Moore exhibition, including the totems? We have 20.
And you're amongst friends. Was there any damage at all?
Oh, you are good. Oh, no.
It must be tricky.
There was no damage in the installation. I'll tell you, not for the press, that when it left New York at 4 in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, what they do is, all the pieces are in crates for the most part, but 2 were unwrapped and on the back of the trucks. And these trucks, you have to set a route, you have to have permits to go through every state, you have to know the height of every bridge between New York City and Atlanta. Think about that, because these are tall pieces. And we knew that. We had the specs on the pieces, how heavy, how wide, how tall. They got to a bridge in New York City, and these trucks also have, I forget what they call them, but stakes that tell them they measure the exact height of the bridge before they go under it. And they didn't do it. And one piece scraped the bridge. And they lowered the tires of the truck to get it through. I didn't know till it was over. And it's a scratch on the patina. It's a scratch on the patina. You'll never see it. You're sworn to secrecy. But things can happen. Things can happen. We have an extraordinary team, and we work with a great subcontractor that helps with the installation, who only does art installation, and they're really terrific. All right, that's it. Cone of silence. Yes, and then I'll come over to you.
You mentioned that the patina pieces naturally change in different light.
Yes.
What would be your favorite times to experience this exhibit?
So the question is, the patinas change in different lights. What would be the best time to experience it?
Your favorite time?
My favorite time has been in the late afternoon. Now, as summer's progressing, that would be later in the afternoon, as the sun is lowering and you get that kind of lower golden hue on it. Now, it's getting hotter, so that might change. Morning is also beautiful. Usually, midday is the harshest sun. We all know that from ourselves and our gardens. But so either morning or late afternoon. And then I always say, come see the art at night, because it's just a whole different. Now, it's not Chihuly, which, the glass just glowed. But I think it's really elegant at night, too. And, every Thursday night we're open late throughout the whole season, through the end of October, and we're lit. And we have a program called Cocktails in the Garden. How hard is that? Come and have a cocktail, bring a friend. And, this is a funny story, but we are known for this nationally. And we have gardens sort of following in our footsteps on this program. When I first got here, we had no young people coming, no 20 and 30-year-olds. That's devastating. We want you and your friends. So how do you get them? You got to have fun. You got to have something hip. So we did Cocktails in the Garden, but we angst over how do you stay true to your mission. So we do a different plant with a different cocktail. This month it's Coleus and Collins, Tom Collins. And then we do a recipe that tells you how to make the Tom Collins. And by the way, is it gin and Tom Collins? That comes from a plant. So you wouldn't be able to drink a single alcoholic beverage without a plant. How true is that to our mission? It's connecting it to your real life. Yes, and then we'll go over
I
here.
know we purchased Chihuly, and it's in the
good.
garden permanently. What are the chances that you could add and have a piece from this exhibit for Atlanta?
My
is it
heart be
purchasable,
still.
and isn't that a goal, trying to achieve something?
It's a great question. The question is, first that we did buy 2 Chihuly pieces, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And is there a chance we could buy a Henry Moore piece for the garden? First, it would be rare for us to want to buy a piece. Well, I shouldn't say rare. We've done it. We did it with Chihuly. We had a donor who bought one that was inside the conservatory that we've now moved to the visitor center. And literally the week Chihuly was to go, I woke up in the middle of the night, woke up my husband, and I said, we can't let it go without an outdoor piece. And he said, of course, as a good husband would at 3 in the morning. Go back to sleep. And I had an executive committee meeting the next day and pitched the idea that we just go ahead and buy it and hope that someone will help us with it, and we did. And I'm glad we did. Nikki, that wasn't possible because she's deceased. With the kinetic exhibit, which I don't know if you saw it, but it was really cool, 2 pieces were purchased because they're so interesting to people. But normally we don't. Henry Moore, I don't think it's possible. He's deceased. This is his collection. This is his legacy. Now, I'm working on him to say, don't you need a piece left in America just on loan? If you're going to send it to the Yorkshire Sculpture Gallery, for heaven's sakes, leave one in America. I don't know. I'm going to work on it, but I don't have much hope. It makes a difference when you lose an artist, whether you can buy their work or not. As you all know, you're on some level in the field, but it's going to be a sad day when it goes. You had a question?
What is the least busiest time to come and visit the Botanical Garden, especially for this major exhibition?
Yeah, Tuesday and Wednesdays. I heard someone say Tuesday. You know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we get much busier. We're not so busy that you can't have a great experience, but Tuesday and Thursday are good. I mean, Tuesday and Wednesday are good, quiet days in the garden. And we have a place for you to park, too. Yes.
If you're the one who decides where all the sculptures go, then kudos to you. I haven't seen the exhibition, but obviously you're an artist and you have a great eye for how to place these things. That's what artists do a lot. But you mentioned the patina. Did he know that they were going to go turquoise or more golden or dark green when he created them? So he was creating with those colors in mind?
Okay. I'll take 2 different. One is, did I lay out the exhibit with the Henry Moore Foundation? Thank you for the compliments. You know, the reason for my success is the people on my staff and people on our board. And I believe in hiring people who are as smart as possible, creative as possible, and all want to, you know, move the ship in the right direction. So it's a team effort. We have a phenomenal exhibitions manager, Kathleen Cook, great eye. So she and I and our horticulture team got engaged on some level in how we could put pieces in certain places, and then the members of the Moore Foundation. So it is not me by any means, by any stretch. We have an incredible team. The second question is about the patina. And the patina he did know. And it's different chemicals. And in fact, what's interesting is some of the patinas, I was told, have actually changed since his death. So there's some freedom within the art team at Henry Moore that take care of the patinas to, you know, to change the patina over time. I don't think they would go from a bronze patina to that turquoise, but they might darken the turquoise, and they're always working on the patina. After it leaves us, they will go back and polish and obviously fix that one boo-boo that was under the bridge. But it's really an interesting part of bronze art is how the patinas work. You know, it's first the maquette and the sculpture, and then it's pouring the bronze, but then the patina really is what makes it pop in the end, and really beautiful. Yes?
Is this exhibit attracting any particular group of scholars that you know about? Are there more people coming back to study because of where the sculpture is right now?
I think the question is, are we attracting certain scholars, and are there more people coming back to study it? The more people, the more foundation team is really about giving grants in England and making sure his work and his legacy gets around the world. So they're working on their next exhibition. So they're not coming and studying it. But we're seeing SCAD and Kennesaw and UGA and all the universities that have art programs are sending their students. And then what I love is we're seeing the young children and schools and, you know, elementary all the way up through high school coming to see the exhibition. And we'll see a lot more of that in the fall. Atlanta is a city that works on word of mouth. So we have all the great billboards and the buses, but word of mouth is what drives visitation and people's, you know, enjoyment of an exhibition like this. So as the schools hear more about it, we will see a lot more of that. But it's just wonderful to see, you know, people sketching and drawing in the garden. That's really what it's about, because then we've inspired people to a different level to act, which is great. Yes?
And how long is it here?
It's here. The question is how long is here? It's here through the end of October. So you know what we do? We procrastinate. It's our nature. And believe me, you're going to want to see it more than once. I really believe that. So don't procrastinate too long. You ready? Thank you. It's great to meet you all. My pleasure.